Hello, my name is Rinon, and in today's video we're going to be looking forward to patch 5.4 of Shadowbringers, which is coming really soon as I'm making this video. This patch is finally going to be bringing us an absolute plethora of new 8-man content, including the new normal and savage raid tier, Eden's Promise, alongside a new primal encounter as well as an additional ARR remake Unreal Trial. This time we're going to be getting Titan, and honestly I might be more excited for that than the raid tier. So today we're going to have a little bit of a talk about the things that you can and should be doing in order to prepare yourself to take on these encounters when they release on December 8th. It doesn't matter too much if you want to go in blind on server up, or if you're going to be waiting a little bit longer, taking your time and using guides to supplement your knowledge. This should help you no matter what kind of player you are. One thing I would like to make a very quick note of is that almost 80% of the people that have watched my videos over the past month are not subscribed, and I just wanted to say that it would help me so much if you enjoyed the video, or if it helped you in some way. Clicking subscribe would mean the absolute world to me and help me out more than you know, so thank you so much for that if you decide to do so. So let's get right into it. These are the pre-patch preparations I believe you should be making as soon as possible. First up is making sure that you stock up on food. Make sure you have a decent quantity of the best in slot raid food for whichever job you intend to bring into progression. On my part, I try to make sure I have a stack of at least 99 in order to ensure that no matter how much I play, I'm not going to run out. It's also essential to remember that whenever a new raid tier comes, there will also be new food recipes released that will be stronger than the previous ones. So you can expect that these current servings you've prepared are going to have a fairly short expiration date. Usually after a week or two of the new patch, you're going to be looking to upgrade to the latest recipes, so bear that in mind, stock up accordingly. Make sure you have enough for the short term and enough gil or time aside to be able to craft and prepare yourself for the new recipes. The second thing is potions, and they are much the same as food. You're going to want to stock up in advance, make sure that you have enough in quantity to clear what you want to clear. Please bear in mind that especially as a DPS class, you're going to need more potions than you might need, say, food. When you're entering a progression setting, in my opinion, as soon as you've hit enrage once on an encounter, you should be potioning every single pull as many times as you can. And even if you're going for a week 1 clear or something like that, or an early clear, you should even be potioning on prog to make sure that you don't even see that enrage in the first place. So make sure that you have a couple of 100 potions of the highest current tier available. Once again, there's going to be new potions coming out soon, so you're not going to need to have a stockpile for after prog. These are simply for progression. And for healers, one last thing to remember is mana potions. You want to stock super ethers because you're going to want to chug those things during prog to make life easier for the rest of your group. Materia are next on the agenda, and that's something that I would advise you prepare in large quantities coming into prog. Even now, if you started today and you started doing hunt trains as soon as you could still have hundreds of materia stockpiled, even if you began from zero. You're going to be wanting crafted gear, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and even if you don't take crafted gear, you're about to be upgrading your pieces rapidly. You're going to need materia, you're going to need overmelds, and you're going to need both grade 8s and grade 7s in large quantities to support that. As a safe minimum, what I like to do is for every piece of crafted gear I'm about to obtain, I like to make sure I have at least 50 materia to make sure that I can get the overmelds in. So, say you're a melee DPS, you're going to want at least 50 pieces of grade 7 materia for each and every one of your new pieces of gear, because you are going to be overmelding that stuff as soon as possible if you plan on raiding quickly. The types of materia that I think are very useful are determination materia, crit materia, direct hit materia, and if you're a melee, you're going to want things like skill speed materia. If you're a healer, you're going to want to stack piety materia and spell speed materia as well. You want to make sure that you are stocked up on everything that you need. And whatever you don't use, you can sell, and you'll make a profit, trust me. As I just mentioned, the next important thing is figuring out what you're going to do about crafted gear and upgrading your gear in general. You want to go in with a plan. You want to know what you're going to do when the patch drops. There's a couple of different avenues that you can actually go down. You don't just have to go for crafted gear if, say, you don't have a lot of gil or you don't have a lot of time, or alternatively, you don't want to go straight into Savage on day 1. What I would do is figure out what your plan of action is. You can either go through the normal raids and obtain some pieces of upgraded 510 item level gear and go through it that way and slowly build up your gear. You could go for the Sapphire weapon for an I-515 weapon, or alternatively you go straight in for a full set of item level 510 crafted gear. If you're going to make it yourself, you can even pre-prepare certain materials that you believe will be used in the gear. If you plan on getting the crafted gear day 1 and you want to raid, you could find a crafter friend and sort out with them some kind of price to have them make the gear for you. Or you can figure out a system among your friends. Maybe you help them gather certain pieces, they craft pieces for you, or maybe they'll craft a set for you and you'll pay them back over time. Anything like that. If you can, and you plan on raiding week 1, you should make sure you have a plan of action to not have to deal with slowly gearing up. You want to immediately be item level 510 as soon as you can. One thing that I think is important is to make sure that you practice as much as possible going into the tier. No matter what you plan on doing, making sure that you understand your opener and your rotation on the job you intend on playing is really, really important. You don't want to be the guy in Party Finder that people get angry at, and you don't want to be the guy holding your static back from progressing. This can be very simple. My recommendation would be to hit a dummy until you're comfortable, go into Party Finder, refresh yourself if you haven't been playing for a few months, and then you are good to go and ready to prog. Next up is to make a plan with your friends or your static, or even just with yourself if you don't plan to play with anyone. Figure out what kind of schedule you're going to be working with on patch, which days you're going to be raiding, whether you're going to be raiding all day, or whether you're going to be raiding evenings, or just 1 or 2 days a week. Are you going to Party Finder? If so, can you find some friends to Party Finder with you and make the experience a little bit more enjoyable? These are things that you should try and figure out ahead of time so that you can go into patch without worrying whether you'll get to play with people or whether you'll clear or things like that. You can just enjoy the new content, have a good time, and do what you decided on. And then the last thing that I would talk about doing before patch is to be able to record your gameplay if possible. I think if every single player could record their own gameplay and every now and then they looked back on it in order to improve, our player base would be much, much better at the game, because you can see the errors that you make when you watch back the gameplay. You can see the problems that happen in your gameplay, the mistakes, and then you can fix them. Using a mixture of FF logs and looking back at your own gameplay is an amazing tool for improvement, and those are things that I used a lot of over the months and the years to make sure that I became a better player. So if you can watch back VODs of your own gameplay and try to critique yourself, you'll improve very, very rapidly. This is more reserved for groups that intend on going into Savage, or even the Extreme Primals or Unreal when the patch comes up. Here's a few things that I recommend you discuss as a group to make sure that you can get the most out of your prog time. First up is going to be making a plan. What you want to do is figure out what you're going to do for blind progression or how you're going to deal with certain mechanics before you see them, because that means that when you encounter those mechanics you can immediately deal with them. I think one good example is making sure that you have Protean Wave positions, or some people call them Earthshaker positions. Whenever a mechanic occurs where you have to spread around the boss, you already have set positions to deal with that mechanic. You also can set up positions for having groups of 2, groups of 4, as well as if you need a position to be, say you need to be in or out on the boss, you can make sure that the group stacks on the butt and you have the tank on front and things like that. I also like to prepare a formation that your team can use when you go into a mechanic you haven't seen before. One of the key things that you want to do when figuring out how to deal with a mechanic is you want to understand how it works. And the quickest way to understand how it works is to use the rules of the game against it. Final Fantasy mechanics are often very linear and set, and they're not going to be randomized too much. So usually they target certain players, or they'll target certain roles and things like that. They may target the furthest person away from the boss, they may target the closest person, they might target the healers, they might target the first and second on aggro. These are all very, very common ways that a mechanic targets. and once you know how a mechanic targets, you can deal with it very, very easily and figure out how it works. So, my recommendation: whenever you go into a blind mechanic, you have the main tank on the front, you have the off tank on one of the flanks at max melee, you have the rest of the group on the butt, preferably max melee, and then you have the ranged DPS away from the group in the back, further away than anybody else. That's going to help you out in a few different ways. If there is a mechanic that targets both tanks, the rest of the group won't be cleaved. If there's a mechanic that targets first and second on aggro, once again, the rest of the group will not be cleaved. If there's a mechanic, such as double drill, that targets the closest and the furthest player from the boss, that mechanic is auto-resolved. You can very clearly see that it works like that, and the rest of the group does not have to die. If there's a stack damage, you have 5 people already in a stack, which is likely going to be enough to survive, and if it isn't, you'll be able to fix that next pull very easily. This resolves so many targeting issues all at once, and I think it's very, very useful to do that because it'll save you precious pulls. So those are my tips for preparing for patch 5.4. I know you don't have too much time left, there's only a few days, but I believe in you guys. I've been kind of preparing last minute myself as well, so let's get it together. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.